Hello guys, can everyone hear me?
Hear you.
Awesome, thank you. Well, thank you so much guys. Thank you for everyone joining us today. We are super excited to have our panelists today, and we are really actually appreciate your time for making this happen for us. Congratulations to our panelists once again for achieving the most important milestone of a medical student by matching into awesome programs. Well, without further ado, I'm going to be passing this on to Yuri, who's going to be facilitating our today's discussion. Yuri, you got it.
All right, thank you. All right, so just wanted to say thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and as well, big thanks to all of our panelists for coming today. I just wanted to do a quick round of introductions. Today with us, we have Colin Carroll, who's doing orthosurgery at University of New Mexico. We have Jennifer Klopfenstein, who's doing vascular surgery at Houston Methodist. We also have Donald Chang, who's doing general surgery at Henry Ford. And we have Cathy, who's doing general surgery at Tulane. Thank you all for coming. And for our audience tonight, we created a list of questions that will be posted in the chat. And the format that we will have is we'll go through these questions one by one. As every panelist will have the chance to answer each of the questions. And then at the end, we will have an opportunity to take questions from the audience. But before we begin, Cathy, could I ask you to just briefly take us through the list of prerequisites that take a first-year student to someone who matched successfully?
All the prerequisites. I mean, obviously you have to pass step 1, step 2. I mean, to match, I guess like step 1 right now, I don't know how big of a deal it is for a lot of you guys since they want to pass fail, especially for the first year and possibly even the second year. But for surgery, you know, they do look a bit at step 1 scores. Not saying that it's super heavily weighted for a lot of things, but it's definitely a filter in some of the cases for us. Again, not really sure how much that matters when it comes to pass fail. Maybe the step 2 will be more important for you guys. Again, there's really not much any absolute prerequisite. Nothing is, I haven't really seen anything that's an absolute deal breaker, even for, you know, they do like to see some research, but it's, you know, if you don't do research or if you have very little minimum research, you can make it up in other aspects as well. And definitely, I think one big one was a letter of recommendation that you will get during your 3rd and 4th year during your surgical rotations. I mean, you must, most of programs actually require you to have 3 letters of rec, and you can have up to 4, which is a maximum by the ERAS application panel, the portal. But typically, like sometimes they'll require a PD letter from a program director, you're typically from your home program, or a chair letter from the chair of the department. So either or, sometimes some program had that requirement. So letter of rec, and then personal statement, which is part of your ERAS package. And there's some other extracurricular stuff that you do in terms of leadership, volunteer work that you had over the last your medical career. So those are pretty much like an overview of the prerequisite.
Thank you for that, Cathy. And the reason I asked is because we may have more than a couple of first years here who may not have a concrete idea of what the entire application process looks like. So I just wanted to go over that briefly. But I guess before we get into the nitty gritty, could you maybe tell us what was your undergrad and grad major, first of all?
Yeah, my undergrad major, I went to University of Florida and I got a double major in biochemistry and anthropology.
How about you, Colin?
So I went to a small school in Southern California, Pepperdine, and I was a sports medicine major there.
Mm-hmm. Donald?
I went to UCLA, who's now in the Final Four, and Then I actually did a grad school, major in biophysics at UCLA. And I had a very non-traditional route. I actually did a PhD at Columbia and then went to med school. So that's my route.
Mhm. And Jennifer?
Hey, I went to Colorado State and I did nutrition, and then I got a master's in human anatomy.
All right, thank you, everyone. So it just goes to show that, you know, future surgeons can come from a very wide variety of backgrounds. So I guess let's move on. I guess Cathy mentioned that, you know, some people who do not have a large research experience make up for it in some other areas. And I know that, you know, work and volunteering experiences can make up for that in some certain amount. So could you take us through some of these experiences that you've had? Let's start with you, Cathy.
So, I mean, my work experience mostly are just before medical school. I took a 2.5-year gap year. I had some really non-traditional work, like I was a skydiving instructor. I worked with kids with autism, just kind of on a behavior side. So I was a behavior analyst. I mean, waitress in college. That's, you know, I think everybody does that a little bit. There's a couple other small things like math tutors. I did tutor, like private tutor in biochemistry when I was in undergrad. So none of those are very significant in medical school. I didn't do any work in medical school. And in med school, the first 2 years, I didn't do too much. I just kind of focused on step studying. And then the third and fourth year, third year, I did a lot of volunteer. This was before COVID. So I did volunteer at any chance I get in anything that's organized by OMSA. And then the fourth year, I was able to continue and take over a lot of those volunteer projects. So I led the fitness club. I did the walk with a dog. I took over AMSA, American Medical Student Association, as a chapter president. I was in SIG with Jen. I just had a list of other things, just small things here and there. I joined the different clubs for volunteerism. But fourth year, we didn't really have to do too much volunteer because of COVID.
No, that's understandable. How about you, Donald?
Well, as mentioned before, I kind of had a long track to medicine. So for me, I worked in the industry before coming to medicine. Like worked at Amgen, a biotech company. I did some consulting. So I had some, you know, I kind of knew what life was like outside, you know, of the medical studying world. And then in medical school, like Cathy, tried to focus on my studies. I did some volunteering on the side, but not, you know, I didn't go crazy about it. Similar to, you know, all my fourth year colleagues, COVID kind of dampened that a bit, but there were still opportunities to volunteer during the COVID time. Notably, there was call centers that was run by the students. And I actually served as the OMSA president, like my final year. And that took up a lot of time behind the scenes. So for me in particular, I couldn't do, you know, that was all my volunteering efforts. I put that into OMSA and stuff. Yeah.
Thanks. How about you, Jennifer?
Hey, yeah. So after my master's, I was just kind of like taking my MCAT, and I worked like as a coordinator, and then I did some research. So I led like some phase 1 oncology trials, and then did like indexina alpha, the factor 10A inhibitor reversal. So I did a little bit of research, wasn't super relevant to surgery. Strokes were kind of relevant to vascular. And then in Australia, yeah, I did a lot of research, some volunteering, like case reports here and there, and like chart reviews in Australia. But yeah, just kind of similar to everyone else, doing some volunteer work in phase 2.
Thank you. What about you, Colin?
Yeah, like most of everyone, most of my work experience started before school. So for about 6 months, I worked as an EMT in the ambulance, and then made a transition to an ocean guard and EMT for the fire department in Huntington Beach. So it's pretty trauma like based, like fractures, dislocations, so pretty relevant to orthopedics, spinals. And then once I got into medical school, I did the small group tutoring, so during my second year, and then did some tutoring throughout medical school. Major volunteer, I mean, I did little things here and there, but Habitat for Humanity was one of my major volunteer experiences, which was awesome. So you're working with saws, hammers, drills, again, somewhat related to orthopedics. But yeah, those are, I guess, the majority of my work experiences, volunteer experiences. I really didn't do much research in the beginning of medical school. That more so came during phase 2.
Thank you for that. Well, that's already, I guess, a very good takeaway from that is that pre-med experiences matter. It's you don't necessarily start with a clean slate, but also experiences that you had collected on your path to med school also contribute to your applications. That's a good takeaway from that. So I guess I'd like to ask a very natural question to GSSA. What made you want to specialize in surgery and specifically within your respective specialties? Cathy?
So I want to do surgery starting, well, I guess a little step back. My family are all engineers. So from very early on, I really liked building stuff, creating things, working with my hand. I thought I might be an engineer for a long time. And then I went to a body exhibit and I really falling in love with human anatomy. And I think that's kind of engineering of the body. So I always very gravitated toward human anatomy. And when I was in college, I did human osteology as part of my anthropology major. So I worked with bone a lot. So I actually wanted to do orthopedics for a long time because I worked with bones for a very long time. And then during my gap years after graduating, I ended up, I got into a motorcycle accident myself and ended up shadowing my trauma surgeon from my surgery afterward. For about 8 months, I went in every Tuesday to the OR with him. And he really showed me, he had a non-traditional route too. So he was a PA before, and he kind of navigated me through the different aspects in the healthcare system and being different type of doctors. So I really looked up to him and I loved seeing the organization in the OR. I think the teamwork in the OR was just fantastic. So ever since then, I really wanted to I know I want to do surgery of some sort. And I was still initially thinking about orthopedic. It's not until I started my general surgery rotation in third year, I realized I actually really enjoy working with soft tissues. And I especially like the upper GI, the abdominal organs. I like open XLAPs and those type of surgeries. So I start getting to research a lot in my fourth year with surgical oncology department, which I'm still doing right now after graduating. And I think right now, tentatively, that's the fellowship I kind of want to aim for is surgical oncology. And I really like the multidisciplinary action of the surgical oncology and curing cancer, treating cancer patients as well.
It does take an entire team to take care of oncology patients. Thank you for that. I guess, what about you, Colin?
Yeah, so I guess what really drove me towards medicine was my undergrad degree. So I was a sports med major. So it was very anatomy based, kinesiology based, biomechanics. So I guess that also drew me to orthopedics, like mobility, functionality, and its importance with health and exercise. So I think, that kind of steered me towards it. I played water polo, Division I water polo at Pepperdine as well. So I interacted with a lot of orthopedic surgeons, saw them firsthand and did some shadowing as well. And I think orthopedics is a really cool surgical subspecialty because, again, some gen surgery people will be upset about it, but I think there's substance to it, there's a physicality to it, which I enjoy. And it's like carpentry, it kind of all makes sense. It's not super complicated, but it makes sense biomechanically. So that's kind of how you think or something that interests you, then orthopedics for sure is the route for you.
All right, thank you. Now, Jennifer, vascular surgery is not a subspecialty people hear about much. So do you mind telling us how you ended up there?
That's kind of especially the integrative pathway has been kind of new in the last 10 years. But we had a really robust cadaver lab at Colorado State. Like we had like 4 people to 1 cadaver. So my undergrad, I was like kind of already hooked, and I did my master's like really focusing on dissection, et cetera. So I was always kind of interested in surgery. I think it's definitely important, especially like in phase 1, to keep an open mind though, because like sure you can like, you know, definitely want to do something, but really like your 3rd year rotation kind of solidifies if you like medicine versus surgery. I actually was like interested in ortho for a second. I'm sure Colin remembered that like back in the day, but like I don't know, I did an observership, and like you kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. And it was actually due to COVID. Like I was gung-ho gen surge, like did my sub-I and gen surge, was planning to do an away, had like 2 aways hooked up, and then it was like peak COVID, so they all got canceled. And so like I'd like rotated a lot at of like a lot of different specialties at Ochsner, and I hadn't done vascular like yet. And so I just kind of did 2 weeks on, and like my first day on service, I was like, this is pretty cool. This is kind of what I want to do. I really like how you have like, you can do kind of like maximally invasive stuff, and then you can also do really fine endovascular work. I like how you have kind of chronicity of patients, like you're managing, you know, you have a lot of continuity and stuff. We're also kind of like, they also call us kind of like the firefighters. Like when something usually goes wrong intraoperatively, like we're often consulted to kind of put it out. So yeah, I really like it. I think it's a unique fit, but yeah, it's the best.
Oh, thank you for that. Now, Donald, do you mind telling us?
Yeah, so mine's a little bit of a different answer. I didn't know I wanted to do surgery coming to med school. I had never shadowed a surgeon before med school. I would actually thought I wanted to be a cardiologist. Yeah, my research before was in the cardiology field, like the basic sciences of it, but the only people I had shadowed before were kind of hospitalists, cardiologists. And I actually did, so I think many of you guys on the call, end of first year, you do an elective in Australia somewhere. And I went to Adelaide for my away elective, and I was on a cardiology 4-week clerkship there. And of those 1 week of those 4 weeks, I rotated with cardiothoracic surgeons to get an appreciation for the surgical management of some of these diseases. And that was when I kind of got the first hook, I would say, you know, went into the OR, helped open the sternum, held the beating heart in my hand. I was like, you know, never looked back after that really. But then I kind of, you know, 3rd year is all about cementing where you want to go. And then again, I came at surgery from a different angle. Even if it wasn't, you know, I guess the idea of surgery wasn't what sold me so much. It was more just like, I just looked at what I wanted to do in my day to day. I wanted to operate, but I still wanted to do medicine. I wanted to be able to do research, and surgery gave me kind of the broadest panel that I could attack, you know, and utilize all my skills. So I felt like it just kind of all naturally fit. And then of course, along the way, you have mentors and people who imprint upon you and really kind of guide you along this path. So that was kind of my path towards surgery. Very, very organic, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. But you know, in the end, all the roads led to Rome. So I guess let's move into the preparation a little bit. So, and this one is a free for all, so answer at your leisure. When did you start studying for step 1, and what were your top 3 resources?
Yeah, so I started studying, like truly studying for step 1, like actually doing questions, things like that, I'd say during 2nd year. I think UQ, like following the curriculum of UQ first year was more than enough. There were some like Becker sessions. I'm not sure if you guys have Becker, but I'd attend those. I think best resources is obviously first aid. Sketchy, I use a lot of Sketchy for like Sketchy Micro, and I use Zanky, like an Anki deck, which I started in the beginning of 2nd year, which I actually thought was the best resource, was the Anki deck. That for me is the best way of studying, all that repetition, but you really have to commit to it because it's a lot of cards. But yeah, I'd say starting beginning of 2nd year is when I started doing questions.
I started really early because I've always known I'm a horrible standardized test taker. I was never great at it, and my reading speed is always really slow. So I started very early, like pretty much first week of medical school. Not doing questions or anything like that, but I used osmosis very early on, kind of, studying the curriculum from UQ, but also study to the depth of what you need for USMLE. And they have, I use Enki too, but they also, osmosis had their own, space repetition flashcard deck. So I use that a lot throughout the first year, pretty much just use osmosis to study UQ material to the depth of a USMLE. And then second year is when I started doing questions and stuff, like Colin said. And I rotate through a lot of resources, actually, now that I think about it. But what Colin said, first aid, definitely. Bible, I annotated that thing so many times, like everywhere. Pathoma, I definitely use Pathoma quite a bit as well. And Sketchy, definitely also another Bible. I use those. And Osmosis is kind of a staple all throughout. So I wrote it through multiple. It's just kind of get a feel of what you study, which material study best with. Like for me, I hate reading. Again, my reading speed is very slow. So but I love listening to videos. I can turn a video up to 2 times speed, sometimes even 2.5 times speed, and I can comprehend just fine. So that helped me a lot. But I had to figure that out for myself the first 6 months of medical school.
Sorry, I lied to you guys. So I did small group tutes first year. That's when I started doing some questions. So that actually, my girlfriend's like, you did small group tutes. It's like, yeah, I forgot about that. But which was like super important. I feel like I learned a lot that way.
You're in the same one, Colin.
No, how did I forget, Jen? That's terrible. Caroline's like, well, you did the small group tute for a year. Oh yeah, and there was also a large group too. So I lied.
Yeah, I did too. I did the same thing.
I would say UWorld is my biggest resource. I don't know. That was like my bread and butter. I was never an Inky person. Sorry if my internet's like being weird. Hope you can hear me okay. I don't know. I've never really been into Inky, so you can definitely do it without. UWorld for everything's like the best though. And first aid, that was pretty much what I used. I definitely started studying like, yeah, you do small your tutes or whatever to kind of keep up with, USMLE through your UQ curriculum. But I probably didn't do UWorld until like the second half of my second year. And like we had RX, you probably like Amboss now. That's like always good if you're like not trying to like pay attention on your questions, but like, you're like on the bus or whatever, just like knock some questions out on the way.
I don't have much to add there. I think just to summarize, I used kind of the same stuff. UWorld, first aid, Pathoma. I also used RX. I never really jumped on the Anki boat, although I'd use it for like cram sessions, just to like before like a UQ test that people would make and share on Facebook. But that's about my extent of using Anki. I think what Colin said is right, but you really have to commit to it, and then it works, And I kind of always just kind of dabbled with it. Never really had a full-on relationship with it, but that could change, And then I think I also want to underscore what Colin said about following UQ curriculum. I think they've really made a huge effort now to whatever is being taught in phase 1 to align with what's being studied, and you need to know for step 1. So I think now definitely if you study UQ well, and medicine is medicine, like you're going to also it will also overlap with your for step 1 studying.
So what I'm getting out of this is there's no love for boards and beyond, huh? I agree with Cathy in that there is, first years especially can get just assaulted with the number of options they have in terms of resources that they can use. So trying a few and deciding what works for you is probably the best way to go.
I actually loved Boards and Beyond.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about it.
I forgot about that too.
I religiously watch Boards and Beyond my second year for sure. And Dr. Najib.
Oh, there we go. All right, I guess let's move on. So I guess let's stick to phase 1 for now. So during phase 1, which opportunities would you say are the most important of the ones that you have during phase one, and that really assists you in your application.
I can go. So I think phase one, I think really it's different again for you guys because step one is, again, I don't think it's graded, it's more pass fail, but for us, step one is the most important thing. Like Cathy said, some places have cutoffs, some specialties have cutoffs, but I think clinical grades as well. I mean, when you're applying, they don't quite understand, most programs don't understand the 1 through 7 grade scale, but they understand where your quartile is, what you're ranked in your class. So that's also super important. And I think, again, that's my personal opinion. I think doing the toots as a second year and teaching those tutorials is super important. It helps with, mastering material, but it's also good when you're going to in these interviews and they ask you, some people really enjoy residents that like to teach other residents or teach medical students. So I think that's a little thing you can put on your resume that's important that you can do during your phase one.
Yeah, I definitely echo the toots. I love teaching toots my second year, and I think I talked about it actually quite often during my interview. Another thing, phase one, I did start a research project second year of phase one. I don't know how important it is to start it that early, but I didn't have much research experience before medical school. So that's kind of like my first big research project. I did it with the orthopedic department at PA. And that really kind of set a foundation for a lot of my later research work that I did in phase two. And although, I don't think we did some posters, but no manuscript or anything came out of that project. But I think I learned a lot because that's my initial exposure to research. And I could bring it to phase two and say that I have some background in research already, and also, prove that I have a little bit knowledge in research.
For phase one, I think, I guess I'm going to take kind of like a 10,000 foot kind of answer to this, but I think doing something that aligns with what you want to do, just being yourself and something that you're passionate about, is probably the most important. UQ has a lot of very interesting opportunities. I'm thinking back on my experiences, like being able to do something very rural in Australia, get a lot of hands-on stuff, because when you do come interview time, you go on this match trail, the interviewers are very curious about Australia. Maybe some of them know about the program because we have a couple classes, but the majority, they ask you open-ended, how was Australia? What did you learn? And if your answer is, oh, I just distanced myself from UQ and I burned my head in first aid, like doesn't make you look good and doesn't make the program look good. So I think really embracing the fact that you're in Australia and looking for those opportunities, there's things you do there that become a lot easier, like putting in IVs. The nurses can't do it in the hospitals in Australia, but here, like in the US, you have IV teams, people putting in, by the time you're done with rounds, all that stuff, little things are done. Just getting hands-on, getting any opportunity you can, and kind of having a story arc that fits. I think all that can help make you a competitive applicant for whatever specialty.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with Donald, be yourself. I got to travel so much in Australia, and that every interview they probably ask you about that. And it's really fun to talk about the cool places. I did some of the, what's it called over there? Or the Incision UQ, those are kind of fun, the skills labs they have. I did a couple case reports. It definitely wasn't super significant. You don't get asked about them really, but it definitely opens the door. If you've never really had research experience before, just kind of the process of submitting something. I picked an observership that I thought I might be interested in. So I would say if you haven't, I guess you probably already signed up for those, but I would definitely maybe consider one that you're something you might be interested in. But yeah, enjoy Australia, especially didn't restrictions just get lifted, traveling state lines, go to Byron.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess let's move over to the clinical years. So for rotations, I guess there's a big block which is internal med and the big block that's surgery. In which order did you do those?
I did medicine first and then surgery. I have a bunch of friends like who are gen surg residents now, and they gave me that advice because like basically the surge shelf is like all medicine, so that helped me do well on the surgical shelf. But I mean, the other people did it other way too, so it's definitely possible. But that's my recommendation, and it's like you're right out of step one. It's medicine's a pretty good rotation to come off of. So.
Yeah, so I guess for people who are not as familiar with the structuring, like you guys in year one, year two, we have 5 rotations. We have medicine and surgery is together as one semester. And then we have OBGYN, peds, and psychiatry as a second semester. So I guess a big divide is picking which semester to go first. I picked the peds, OB-GYN, psych first, because I was thinking that if I want to do surgery, because I knew I kind of want to do surgery. If I wanted to do surgery, I wanted to get more experience clinically just in general, so I know what I'm doing when I get to my surgery rotation. And also, hopefully at that point, I already know the hospital a little better, so I'm not fumbling even looking for directions. I'm looking kind of dumb in front of the attending doing that. So I did that first, and then I like exactly what Jen said. I did medicine and then surgery. I think that's what Jen said. Medicine. So I did medicine and then surgery second. So because there's a lot of surgery shelf has medicine on it. So I did surgery actually as my very last rotation.
So I did similar to Cathy, and same thought process, just getting more comfortable in the hospital. So I did peds, OB-GYN, and psych first. It's definitely a little scary when you first scrub in, because I did OB-GYN first, so I had no idea what I was doing, and you kind of look like a little bit of an idiot, but you get used to it. And I think OB-GYN's, there's a good amount of surgery, so you're in the OR scrubbing and things like that. And then I did similar. I think I did IM surge. Also, I like that too because I took step 2 in November before you can do an optional elective in something you're interested in between 3rd and 4th year. So I took step 2 in November. So surgery and IM is the majority of step 2. So I felt like it was good prep going in, and I took maybe 2-3 weeks to study for step 2, and then took it, and then went straight into my ortho optional elective.
So I followed a similar one. I did psych, and then OB-GYN, and then peds for the first half of the 3rd year, and then the second half I actually did surgery first and then IM, because my intent was I wanted to take my step 2 over break, and then it's a lot of internal medicine as well, so I was trying to ramp up for that. I ended up taking it much later, but that was my plan. It worked out well. I think both schedules, my comment is just that doing it later or earlier, they can both work. Just have to know the pros and cons. And if I had done it earlier, some of my colleagues, you have the whole year to foster a longer relationship with the attendings that you met on a surgery rotation, even if you're not as used to scrubbing in or whatnot. So that's something to consider too. And they definitely see you differently also. Like they look at someone who's the beginning of 3rd year versus end of 3rd year. I definitely think that they're expecting more from you too. So it's almost like it cancels each other out, in some ways.
Oh, thank you for that. Also, Colin brought up doing step 2 before your optional elective. Is that something you did as well, or did you do it the other way around?
For me,
I did exactly what Colin did.
Yeah, I did not. I took it like sometime middle through 4th year, pretty late. I took it one of the later ones.
I was intending to take it over break, but I ended up doing like a couple more weeks on sub-I than I intended, and it was really hard to study after like a 5-week sub-I. So I pushed it back to like February, and I was like gonna take it before Christmas. So I definitely would have given myself a little bit more time to get through UWorld and like give myself a break. But yeah, we all kind of shoot to do it kind of early, I think.
Seems that's the way to do it. Okay, so I guess let's also talk about away rotations. Did you do them? Where? When? The logistic questions.
So for our year, it would be different because COVID happened. Away rotation, I think, for most of us was canceled. When COVID hit, we were on block 2. I was actually in Australia for my return to Australia block 2 rotation. So if you had away rotation in block 1, which typically they don't advise, and I forgot why. I think they wanted you to take CS or something. So not a whole lot of people go away for block 1, and a few more go away for block 2. So if you're in those 2 blocks in our year, you end up doing aways. But for the rest of us, we did not do away.
Donald did one. He did one like in December. Yeah, I would definitely recommend to do, if you're trying to do an away, do it like block, at least for general surgery, like block 4 or 5, because maybe even 3, because basically if you do it too late, you're going to be with all the American sub-I students, but you don't want to be too early where they like forget about you. So I'd say like that's a good time to shoot for. But yeah, go for it, Donald.
Yeah, so I was able to do an away. I did it between 3rd and 4th year. I did it at Santa Barbara Cottage. Sorry, guys. Hold on.
He's calling.
I know. Sorry, I have 2 boys. So if anybody on this call has a family too, I can talk about that. But I did it between 3rd and 4th year at Santa Barbara Cottage in California. The logistics of it, it's honestly kind of doing a ways. It's a bit hairy. It's as an IMG, a lot of places, they don't take IMGs to start with, and then there's some paperwork you have to get through. But that's probably the hard, especially in California as well. But I will say, if you do it between 3rd and 4th year, the con of that is that you're doing it really early from the application season. So you have to, if that's someplace you want to go, you have to keep in touch with them all the way from, that Christmas season to September of application to kind of keep you fresh on their minds. But the pro is that it's kind of off cycle compared to US med students. They typically do their rotations closer to ERAS. So you're kind of not competing in the same pool. They might have openings. I think that's how I probably got mine. And then I will say that student affairs is, they try their best to help with it and work with UQ to get you all the paperwork to work with the aways. And if you just start early, I started looking beginning of probably about halfway through my first semester, 3rd year, at aways and trying to get that stuff locked down. So long on ramp, but that was my path.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. Orthopedics is very sub-I driven. It's important for gen surge. I'm not sure about vascular, but ortho is like very sub-I driven. So some people do 3 or 4 away rotations. So one program started doing these quote virtual aways. So you like log in, there's like journal club or lectures with faculty. So I did a virtual away with USC, Southern California, which was a month long. And I was doing my ED rotation, which is 3 weeks. And then I had a week off. So they let me work the night shift, and then I could go or attend morning virtual sub-Is at USC, which was awesome. I learned a ton. And other programs did like weekly like lectures or meet and greets with residents and things like that. So University of New Mexico, where I matched, had one of those. University of Buffalo, where I interviewed, had one of those, and I interviewed at USC as well. So I guess I don't know if they're going to do it this year or future years, but I think it was a good way to learn some material, meet faculty, meet residents, kind of develop relationships. I know for sure New Mexico, those that attended those lectures were like the first people looked at during the application process. So it's definitely a factor, but ortho is very sub-I driven. I think this year you only can do 1 away rotation for applicants this coming applicant cycle. So yeah.
Oh, Thanks, Colin. And I'm also happy to hear that you had a positive takeaway from the virtual. So it was a crazy year. So it's nice to see that some of the adaptations they took had a positive outcome. But also, just before we move on, I wanted to follow up with Jennifer and Donald. You mentioned staying in touch with the place where you're going to be doing your OA rotation. So obviously there's the paperwork, the application applying process for it, but what else do you do? How do you communicate with them, I guess?
You mean when you're done, like when you're done with your sub-I? Okay, well, I just, you want to walk a fine line. You don't want to annoy them, but you kind of want to stay in touch. So if I found an opportunity or there is a conference that I would attend, I might reach out and be like, hey, I'm going to this conference. I noticed, I searched the abstracts if they were presenting as well and say, oh, I noticed that you're there, try to touch base. That's definitely fair game. Conferences are a place for everybody to network, very safe, or you're not intruding on their personal space. If they're a hospital or some resident, got some award or research thing, I might send a congratulations. With the residents in particular, you get really close with them during the sub-I. So I might ask them for advice or keep in touch with them that way. That's a little bit less formal. So those are the kind of different degrees and the spectrum of how I kind of kept in touch with the program. I did ask the program director for a letter of recommendation that I did my sub-I at. So that's another way to stay in touch. So those are kind of the different, I guess, channels I went through.
What about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I had I was like really gung-ho gen surg, like I hadn't even rotated vascular. So I had two different ones set up, like one at a big academic place and then one that I was just a program I was interested in, but they got canceled like right when they were approved. But yeah, I did the LSU virtual sub-I. It was like not an official rotation, but vascular had a ton of the virtual stuff going on, and vascular is definitely like sub-I or very much like OA rotation based. So if you're interested in vascular, definitely. I was like super late to the game. Like most of my, people who matched in vascular, they like knew beginning of third year, and I was like halfway through fourth. So I was definitely late to the game. So I would say if you're interested, you definitely do rotations. Also, Brisbane's actually super known for like they like only manufacture this one device there. So like vascular surgery is pretty cool over there. So maybe do an observership or like just try to get connected that way.
Interesting. And how about leading up to this rotation? Do you get in touch with them before you come in, or is it just the application process for that?
Yeah, vascular is pretty small. So I had known the LSU PD, but yeah, you just kind of do the application cycle. One of the programs I was interested in, like I knew one of the residents who kind of helped, but the admin at Ochsner are pretty good at getting all the paperwork together and that kind of thing.
All right, thank you. So we already discussed the timeline of writing step 2 a little bit, but and we briefly touched on resources, but that was for step 1. How about step 2? What resources did you use in particular? Cathy?
I think for step 2, I definitely used UWorld as one of my major resources. There's also this MBOSS was a really good resource throughout third year for just a rotation wise as well. They have an app on the phone where you can just bring up one topic that your patient has a disease, say like AAA or something, and you can read all about it. And they might have some little question at the end that you can practice. So MBOSS was really great. UWorld, and toward the very end during my dedicated time, which I didn't spend nearly as long for step 2. For step 1, I had 5 weeks dedicated. For step 2, I think I only did a 3-week dedicated, or maybe in 2.5. But during my dedicated, I brought back osmosis because I just really like osmosis. So those are the 3 I stayed with.
How about you, Colin?
Yeah, Yankee all day. I'm all about the Yankee. But I also did online med ed, which I think it's a Tulane doc that puts it on. He does online videos, which are pretty good. You can, I guess you can watch the videos for free, or you can subscribe and get the notes down, and you can download the notes and take notes within the notes. I definitely recommend that. And then UWorld, of course, for questions. And yeah, it took 2 to 3 weeks, I think, for dedicated for step 2, but I studied a good amount during 3rd year. You kind of have to be disciplined during 3rd year, but it's definitely doable to take it after 2 to 3 weeks of dedicated after finals.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I mostly just used UWorld and then like Amboss when I was on rotation studying for the shell. You can definitely watch MedEd like during your rotation as well. I think that was mostly all I used. You can get like MBMEs too online, which have like the retired questions. There's like some free ones floating around, so definitely try to get your hands on those. But I like studied for it. Like my plan was to do, like I did psych at the end, and then I like was gonna study for it during psych and then take it then. Cause psych's more of a chill rotation, but that's my 2 cents.
All right. What about you, Donald?
Yeah, same formula. Definitely online med ed. Like I actually asked Colin for some help on getting some of the materials there for online med ed. UWorld. I did use Amboss, but I didn't really use it very much during dedicated. And I actually used a little bit of actually RX as well, which was kind of a little nugget that I did at the very end. And that was shared by one of our colleagues. My colleagues went on your show, actually recommended it because it was all about learning your weaknesses. And for me, sometimes it was, RX has a very certain style of questions that for whatever reason seemed to trip me up. So like I worked on that, and every question bank has their pros and cons, but if you stick with URoad, you stick with online med ed, and get those practice MBMEs as kind of your checkpoints, you'll be grand. Yeah. I need a minute to check on the kids really quick. I'll be right back. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. So while Donald is checking in on the kids, I guess let's get another question going. Let's talk about the rotations a little more. Assuming you got the grades that you wanted, you got good grades on your rotations. What were the do's and don'ts, I suppose?
Never show up late. That's number 1 for sure, especially on surgery. Never show up late. Usually show up early. Again, I think prepping for step 2 will help you like during your clinical rotations. And I think even like Jen said, actually, it's really important to keep an open mind. Like you don't want to be that person that just wants to do ortho and doesn't care about anything else, because that gets back to ortho or gets back to vascular. I think it's important to be well-rounded during your clinical rotations. Learn as much as you can. Just try to be enthusiastic. I wasn't a huge IM person, but I felt like I learned a ton during my IM rotation. Psych, I was like, this is gonna be so bizarre. I actually really like psych. I thought psych was super interesting. So you'll find things that you like and probably can apply it to whatever specialty you're going into.
Yeah, I think all the do's definitely what Colin said, being enthusiastic, be there on time, be helpful. I think one of the biggest thing not to do is like you're never too good for anything. So like if a nurse asks you to help for something, do it. Like just be helpful to anybody. You're never too good for anybody. Like even a janitor asks you to help to push a cart out of the way or something, I'd still do it. Just kind of keep a good positive attitude and be helpful to everybody.
Yeah, work hard, don't complain. Enjoy, like even if you think you like hate the rotation, like even if you don't like OB-GYN, like you're gonna have a pregnant patient at one time in your life. Like, that's the only time you're doing OB-GYN. So work hard, try to get as much out of every rotation as you can, and be positive. It makes everyone else look good, makes our program look good. Don't show up late. Don't be the person who doesn't show up. It's like you're paying a lot of money. You're paying like what, $300 a day or something. It's like your money's worth.
That's definitely fair advice, and just goes to show there is no secret to actually acing your rotations. You just have to show up, and obviously keep an open mind. You don't want to be like Colin said, you don't want to be the person who just sticks to their guns. Just, I don't care about psych. I want to be an ortho, and because obviously that won't sit well with the people who are supervising you. What about you, Donald? Did you have any specific do's and don'ts throughout your rotations?
I caught the end of what people were saying. I agree with everything they say. For me, I think one advice I have is kind of also having like situational awareness. You're going to be really concerned about getting your paper signed, your school stuff signed, but you're working with residents, attendings they need to care for the patient. So you have to remember the context that you're working in, be a team player. The nice thing is that you're playing doctor, on the wards. You get to look after patients, you get to go see them on your stuff, you get to apply all that knowledge. So you should take full advantage of it. The skills that you start developing in those clerkship years are the same ones that they're going to echo again intern year. A really funny one that I don't know, it kept coming up, at least for on my wards, was like never lie, which is a weird thing to say because it's such a basic one, but like never lie, because you'll see it. Like they'll see sometimes like people do an exam on a patient or something, and they'll say something that isn't quite true or something just to make themselves look a little bit better, or vital signs that they didn't really actually check up, but they're just saying they're stable, but they're not. Like, just never lie. Your reputational currency, like, it's hard to build and easy to lose. So just, navigate those waters. And they talk about us. They definitely talk about the Ochsner students. We're the only students in the Ochsner wards. Occasionally there's some Tulane students or students doing aways, but this is our hospital and these are our attendings. So they get to know us.
Well, that's definitely a fair point to bring up. So I guess before we move on, let's just briefly touch on research and publications again. We went over it a little bit earlier, but can you talk us through what is your experience with just doing research and doing publications?
I can start off this one because I know I had a lot of research experience beforehand, and I think there's definitely UQ tends to attract, I think, some non-traditionals that have done a lot of research. So for me in particular, because I've done a lot, just for in my situation, I wasn't so concerned with like trying to pump up those numbers. It was more about trying to find a good project, trying to make sure that I could still show that I was productive even in medical school. Because if you're somebody, if your story arc is you've done a lot of research and now you've turned to medicine, you don't want a big gaping hole during your medical school where you just didn't do any research. It kind of doesn't fit the story, So I kept active that way. Research-wise, I think I had try to get a first author publication if you can. And I think I had one or two throughout medical school, and then try to co-author as many as you can. Abstracts, poster presentations, that all counts as part of research, even if it's not like a manuscript, because that gives you opportunity to also present at conferences. And if you can give podium talks, that's even better, because that's a level up from just a poster. And probably, at least for me, one of the most important parts of doing the research was you foster a relationship with the attending, with the PI. And those are the people that go up to bat for you when it comes for application time.
How about you, Cathy? Because as you mentioned, you didn't have a whole lot of undergrad research coming into med school.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I didn't have really much at all. I did, one summer of research in college, bench work, really like more like a lab assistant. So that's the extent of my research before medical school. I actually really hated research when I didn't know research. So I just assumed I would hate it because I hate writing. I hated reading. I was like, this is everything I hate about like a specialty. So I started that research in ortho department second year because I know that, as an IMG wanting to do ortho, they want to look at some research publications. So I actually went to Donald and one of our other mutual friend, Danielle, she's a Canadian. They too have tons of publication, they do research all the time. So I went to them for a lot of advice when I first started this research project. I think Donald practically drafted one of my first like paragraph of the abstract. Essentially, like he held my hand step by step to figure out how to do this. And then eventually, when I started doing research, I found that, it's not just writing. Writing is the essential component of research you just must do, but it's a huge thing. Like I fell in love with research actually, which is why I took this research position. There's a design component. You had to do a whole study design. You can do statistical analysis. You had to understand those. So I love those data and design and execution component of the research, so that it makes writing at the end much less painful. So there's a lot to research that's aside from just writing a paper and reading a bunch of other paper. Yeah, so I started with the ortho, and then when I got to third year, I kind of seeked out some opportunities, and through a resident, I was able to get on this the surg-onc research position in the end of my third year, beginning of my fourth year, and I carried that project all the way through.
Thank you, Cathy. And I guess let's move on to the big process itself. So how did you decide which programs to apply to, and how many did you apply to? And I wanted to start with Donald.
For me, I applied very broadly. So in some ways it's a little bit easy because I'm sorry, they're trying to karaoke. In some ways it's a little bit easier because you're just you're not, we have a bit of an uphill battle, so you can't be picky. Sorry. Yeah, COVID times, everybody's going crazy in house. So I applied, I think, almost 180 programs. How did I pick them? I have roots in California, so just everything west of like Texas. It was just like I'm just gonna apply it out there, wasn't picky at all. And then because I did my grad school in the Northeast in New York, so I applied around there as well, some Midwest ones, and then you should always give your home institution some love. So Louisiana, around this region as well. So I just applied very broadly, is the short answer, for me.
What about you, Colin?
So I applied to every single ortho program that was MD based. So there's some programs that are DO based. They traditionally take DOs, and then there's those that are MD. So I think there's like 150 or 160 ortho programs. So I applied to every single one. And I also dual applied. So I applied to 25 surge prelims. Did not get a single gen surge prelim interview. And yeah, I think traditionally for orthopedics, most applicants apply to every single program, MD program at least. And I think I was born in Chicago, I grew up in California, and then going to school in Louisiana. So I had kind of interviews throughout the country. So I think also that was helpful, having geographic ties to different areas of the US.
Oh, that makes sense. What about you, Jennifer?
There's 64 in the match this year for vascular, so you apply to every single vascular one usually. And then I dual applied to gen surge because I've always loved general surgery. I think I ended up applying to like 114 programs total. Gen surge wise, I did not want to go to an academic place, and a lot of the vascular, you don't apply to the same ones because it goes through the same coordinator. So I applied to like mostly community based. I think I threw in like 5 or 7 prelim gen surge, and I didn't get a single prelim interview either. But I think that's kind of like they save them for SOPing and stuff. But yeah, I would say location and then like community versus academic.
Was there a particular reason you did not want to apply to academic places?
Most of the vascular places are all academic, so you like can't apply to the same ones. But I didn't want to do 7 years of gen surge and then a fellowship. Like I know I didn't want to be just a general surgeon, so.
Makes sense. How about you, Cathy?
So I applied to 174 programs. all general surgery, and I didn't do apply or anything. I literally did the opposite of Donald. I did everything east of Texas because I really like the east, and I lived in Florida, and I really love the East Coast. And I couple matched with my partner who is in pediatric and from Texas, so we did a lot of Texas programs. And my process kind of, we both actually came up with our own individual list of places that we want to apply to. I think that came up to about 100 for me. And then we came together and matched the geographic. I guess we kind of did it by what program we think we'll have a shot at. So I didn't really apply, obviously, like I didn't really do any Johns Hopkins or any of those Ivy League schools. But for anything else, it's really just a fair shot. I did apply very broadly. So when we match our list back together, I all of a sudden went from 100 to 174 programs because for pediatric, there's a lot less number of programs compared to general surgery. And then on top of that, I checked about, I think, 35 prelim spots. So if you're applying to a categorical program already at an institution, you can just check the box for prelim. They will consider you for prelim as well at free of charge. It's not another application fee on top of that. And I did not get a single prelim interview either. And kind of like Jen said, they save all of those spots for SOAP. Even our PD, Dr. Furman, he straight up said that like if they do interview you, they will interview very late in the season, and a lot of time they don't even do the interview, they just save it for soaping later.
You mentioned prelim programs. Can you talk a little more about them? What they are, just in general.
Yeah, so prelim program is, they have it in medicine and surgery both. And for surgery, it's essentially a 1-year contract. You have a temporary position to do 1 year of residency, either in surgery or internal medicine. A lot of time they're used to bridge some of the gap for other specialties like radiology, dermatology, anesthesiology. Those are all programs starting at year 2. So you need a year of internship. This is more like a traditional sense of internship. And that's where they can match into prelim surgery or prelim medicine. But a lot of time for surgery wise, if you're interested in general surgery and you didn't end up getting a categorical general surgery spot, then you can, one of your backup option is to go into a surgery prelim spot, work your ass off for that 1 year, really prove yourself, get whatever gap. If you didn't have a lot of research in your previous application, do a lot of research in that year on top of your prelim, impress some people, get some really good letters, and hopefully the next year going back into the match and matching to the specialty that you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And could one of you talk us through how the matching algorithm works, just in general?
It's kind of confusing, to be honest with you. There is a video on nrmp.com that you can look up. So essentially you go on X number of interviews and you rank those programs 1 to whatever. Say you had 20 interviews, 1 to 20. And then the programs that you interviewed at, they take every applicant, they rank them 1 to 90 or 1 to 80. And so essentially it's, I guess, applicant driven. So if you have like University of New Mexico #1 and they have you and they have 5 spots and they have you 4th, you're gonna match at University of New Mexico. But if you're say 8th on their list, they have 5 spots and those 5 people had them 1st as well or 2nd, but they're higher up on the list, they'll match, and then you'll go to your second choice, which is University of X. And then so you do that kind of all the way down your list. So it's applicant driven, meaning if you rank a school high on your list and they rank you highly, you'll likely match there. But sometimes they don't rank you as highly and you kind of move down your list slowly. Then there's the couples match. So Cathy couples match, I couples match as well. So that's very complicated. And I'll let NRMP explain the couples match.
I posted the link in the chat, unless one of my colleagues wants to take another stab at it. But it's a bit confusing, but I think the big takeaway is that you don't need to game the system. It just really preferences the applicant. So really, when you think about where you want to go, you just rank it in that order. You know, you don't benefit by like trying to outsmart it. You won't. It favors us.
Thank you, Donald. And I guess it's one of those rare occasions where it benefits to be a fortune teller. So I guess in the worst case scenario where your plans for matching didn't work out, what sort of contingency plans did you have? And let's start with Donald.
So I forgot to mention earlier, but I also had actually dual applied as well, and almost the same amount of I dual applied internal medicine, because I had mentioned earlier, I also really like cardiology, so I like anything to do with the heart. So I would have probably gone down IM in hopes of cardiology fellowship and stuff. So that's one way, you dual apply as your contingency, but assuming you don't match at all, which is a scary thought, of course, for everybody, but for me personally, I would consider reapplying. You always should. What good is the MD if you can't get into training and be board certified? To be honest, it's a difficult path because you've got, no matter what you do, you're going to be limited options. You got to do research, which is going to be hard to pay the bills. But if you go out and work in industry, you trade off perhaps a more cushier salary, but you're not as clinically focused, and you're kind of out of the academic world. I know Ochsner they try to help out, and there's, they might throw some positions your way. They even mentioned scribing and stuff like that, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call have done already. So those are some of those possible contingency plans you can do. I think most people for surgery, if you're surgery orientated, your first thought should be trying to get into a scrambled prelim year if you can. And then if not, trying to do, if you still want to do surgery, I think most would agree trying to stay surgery research oriented and working those connections.
That makes sense. How about you, Jennifer?
Probably the same, just like try to get a sweet prelim spot somewhere and be a rock star for the whole year, which is hard to do, or do some research. On the IM side, I actually know someone who didn't match their first year, and then they did, they kind of like, I think maybe knew they weren't going to do as hot, and so they applied to Australia, like in the middle of fourth year, and then they did an Australian internship, and they ended up having a really, really good match. So you can definitely do that like the next year.
And for Colin and Cathy, since you both couples matched, did you have any special considerations for a situation where the couples match didn't work in your favor?
I honestly think couples match work for you more than against you. Even from the preliminary NRNP data this year, couples match rate is 1% higher than general USMD matches. Where it helps you is not the actual matching process. Where it helps you is the interview process. So I'm pretty sure Colin also had something like this similar, but we had an email template. So whenever I will get an interview at a certain institution, I will immediately send that institution an email saying that I'm couples matching. Here is my partner's program coordinator's information. Can you please let them know to have a look at my partner's application as well? And then he also sent in an email saying that, hey, my significant other just got an interview at your institution. Or if there's not a corresponding program, then we can find like the closest program in that vicinity, be like, hey, do me a favor, can you do that? And I think we were able to get each other about 3 to 4 interviews that way between the two of us, just to send opposite institution emails. So that's where it really helps you instead of, but then when it comes down to the actual algorithm, it's really, it's very unique for everybody. You had to just sit down and talk about where you want to rank different thing and where your each priority is at.
Interesting, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Cathy. I think couples matching is actually beneficial in regards to getting interviews. Ortho is a little different. they gave, I think 90% of the interviews came out on one day, and my girlfriend did peds. So peds, she was getting interviews way before I was going to get interviews. So those that she got interviews at, she emailed the program director, and then I reached out to the program director for ortho. It's kind of hard to say whether she got me interviews or not. There's a couple interviews that she had that I ended up getting on that single day, and then I got her a couple interviews as well. And the couples match, yeah, I think you have to do every combination possible, so it takes a lot of time, and you kind of have to make sacrifices. One person has to sacrifice something, and the other person does as well. And at the very end, say if I didn't match, Caroline my significant other would do all of her programs, and then I put no match next to it. So if I were not to match, she would be able to match somewhere, and then I would be unmatched. But that's usually what you do at the end of the couples match in regards to the rank list.
Briefly, we also talked about letters of recommendation. We talked about getting 3, maximum of 4, and that one should come from your PD. How did you go about choosing people that will write the other 2 or 3 letters of recommendation? And Donald, if you don't mind starting us off.
Yeah, and just as a heads up, sorry, this is probably my last question I have to answer, but I'll give Yuri and you my contact, so you guys are happy to reach out and answer questions after. For me, so how do I choose the letters? For surgery, I think you should try to get, there's different opinions, but I do think all surgery oriented ones, for general surgery at least. And then try to get people that can obviously speak to your abilities, but I do also think, getting a bit of that brand name, someone who's an authority, respected leader in the field is huge. On my interview trail, one of my letter writers was someone that was quite well known in the region, and it was brought up on a couple of different times that, oh yeah, this person commented and said this in the letter. So it was like, it definitely plays a role. And that's a hard balance, because sometimes the younger attendings that aren't as established yet have more time with you and may imprint more on your learning, but they may not actually be the strongest person you want going to bat for you when it comes to letter writing. So there's going to be an ongoing debate, and there's going to be a lot to go into there, but that's where I'll stop and leave it at. And so I just want to thank you guys for letting me jump on this call. It's good seeing you again, Colin, Cathy, Jen, and for anybody that's from Australia that wants to reach out for questions, I'm happy to do it post-call.
Thank you, Donald.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for coming.
Guys. Thanks.
So how about you, Cathy?
Yeah, so I definitely echo what Donald said. The name is an impact factor for sure. I started quite early because I had my surgery very last rotation. So that's kind of pretty close to a time. Next year, sometimes people ask a letter of recommendation during the away rotations right after the last rotation of third year. So I asked a couple during my third year just in case, and I ended up not really using a whole lot of my third year letter of recommendations. And I also definitely asked a letter from my PI from research and the PD. And we automatically, in Ochsner, for surgery at least, they automatically organize the chair letter for you. You don't really have to even work with him. But we ended up working at least with him one rotation. He's a vascular surgeon, Dr. Money, so Jen worked with him a lot more. But we end up arranging a meeting with him, and he gave you a letter automatically. So I ended up with a lot more letters than 4, and you can only apply maximum of 4 to each programs. So how I end up choosing which 4 is kind of geographically. I think about, does this doctor have some tie to these hospital geographically? And if they do, like one of my doctor, he trained in the Northeast, like in New York. So I ended up using his letter for all the New York institutions, and then the rest use others. That's kind of how I went about that.
Mm-hmm. So how about you, Jennifer? Did you aim for to get a letter of recommendation from any big name vascular surgeon, or did you have other ideas?
Yeah, luckily our chair is pretty famous in vascular, so that was fortunate for me. He's going to be an invaluable mentor for sure for the rest of my career. So I had to do 2 separate applications because so I had 3 vascular surgeon letters, and then I had a bunch of gen surg letters as well. Like I literally used 1 letter from 1 person just for a specific institution, and it got me an interview there. Like that didn't end up doing, but you know, you can like just tailor it that way, or like if they have a certain connection or a certain area. Like one of the transplant guys is like pretty well known in certain places, so I would like tag that on some of my vascular letters. But definitely who your mentors are, like who will vouch for you, because I know like I've heard rumors about people getting like blackballed in their letters before, like from US schools. Like if they've done like an away at a big name, like I've heard that they didn't get any interviews, that kind of thing. So definitely someone you trust and that like, you know, is kind of someone who's been mentoring you. But yeah, I started early. Like I think I like locked my first one down like my 3rd year sub-I, like the Christmas break of 3rd year. So
Interesting. And how about you, Colin?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, people talk about like getting big names for letters. I really don't think big names are important. It's more like what they're saying in the letters. So for ortho, I felt like what was super important was to show face all the time. So they have morning report in the mornings, which I went to before before rotations. I used to go in on weekends and holidays. I think faculty seeing you over and over and over and over again shows that you're seriously interested in the subspecialty. I think, yeah, you just develop relationships with people when you're in the OR with them a lot or in clinic. I ended up getting a chair letter and then one from a ped surgeon and one from a trauma surgeon for ortho. And then I actually used a gen surge letter. So back to my point of making sure that you're enthusiastic and try to enjoy every rotation. Like I thought gen surge was interesting, but I really had a good relationship with a colorectal surgeon. So I used his letter and sent it to ortho residencies. I think you don't have to have a chair and a program director. You can have either one. Some programs require a chair. Not all of them require a chair letter. So that's something to research. And I think also, again, showing face, being around all the different faculty is important. So I didn't get a letter from Dr. Plost, who's a peds ortho surgeon, but the program, she went to University of New Mexico to train there for residency. And she talked to the program director before I got my interview there. So I think those kind of connections are important, or having attendings reach out to places they trained, which I had a couple do, and I got interviews as well through that. So connections are super important in developing relationships with not just your letter writers, but all the faculty and even residents, because they talk to the attending. So.
And would you say that just building those connections consists of just showing up and being there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that definitely takes time. So, I mean, like I said, I went in for a morning report every day that I possibly could, went in on weekends, holidays. And I think, most of the time you're spending your time with residents. The residents talk to attendings. You don't have a ton of face time with attendings, at least for ortho, except in the OR. But there's definitely communication between residents and the attendings. So I think, yeah, showing up, staying late, getting there early, being enthusiastic, trying to think ahead, especially when you're in the OR, what the next step is. So, yeah, I think that those are all important things.
All right, and just final question for me. So could you please give us specific first year, second year, and third year advice? So just given that, you've been through this before, were there any specifics that, that really helped you excel during first year, second year, and moving forward?
Yeah, I think first year, so in the very beginning, I think it's important to get to know your class, enjoy yourself a bit. It can be overwhelming at first. I mean, I was out of school for a couple of years before going to medical school, so getting back in the groove can be tough. But I think going to those small group toots, you know, staying on top of the UQ lectures in first year is important. Second year, I think doing a tutorial, doing a small group's good. Studying for STEP. I say third year. I thought third year was the roughest, at least for me. I didn't do any research before or like in undergrad or during first and second year. So all my research was during essentially my third year. So I did a lot of research, studying for step 2, going in on weekends. My girlfriend wasn't super happy about me going in on weekends and vacation time, but I think certain sacrifices, you know, it's definitely worth it in the end. And fourth year, you're doing, you know, optional electives if there are sub-Is if possible. You want to make a good impression there. And a lot of it's actually ERAS and interviews too. So I guess that's just a quick snippet for each year.
All right, thank you. How about you, Cathy?
Yeah, I think I actually really agree with all of what Colin said. Like first year for me, I would say definitely, you know, UQ driven, and personally, because I already know that I don't do well in standardized exams. So for people who know that about yourself, start early and start studying early. And second year, I love the toots. I love teaching the toots, and I think that was a big talking point for me during my interview. And third year and fourth year, I think for clinical year, it's just, you know, I was just being eager. I think being eager is like a pretty big thing for me. Like I jumped at all the opportunities I was presented. And did a bunch of things in different avenue, like volunteering, leadership, research. Pretty much anybody asked me, I would do it to have a really well-rounded application. So I think that really did help out as well.
And how about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I would definitely say first and second year, like have fun, enjoy Australia. Like you literally moved there for a reason. So like enjoy yourself, travel when you can. Third year, get involved. You can, it's definitely different when you all come back to phase 3 because it's like you're not with the Australians anymore. But like, I don't know, maintain like having fun, and like everyone's pretty stressed out sometimes. So I think it's important to like be positive, and you mean like it only looks good for our program for everyone else to do good. So even though you like feel you're in competition, like, you know, be the positive person and have fun, work hard, play hard.
Thank you for that. All right, so that concludes questions for me, and I'm now going to direct it to the audience. And I think Ibek actually had the first question, so I'm gonna have him take it away.
Thank you guys once again for taking us through your journey. That was very interesting and enlightening. So I do have a question, and we actually touched upon this question or the this thing earlier. But before I'm gonna ask this question, I would like to say a small disclaimer. That is, the answer to the following question might require some speculations. And the reason for that is it's about an unprecedented situation, and most likely our current panelists, I mean, they didn't get a chance to ponder on this idea. And so please do your own research in addition to what you're going to be taking away from the answers. So my question, before I'm going to dive into the question, it's basically it's about the pass and fail process of the step 1. So if you're going to be taking this step 1, according to USMLE website, if you're going to be taking this by the end of this year, you're going to be receiving a scored report, scored result. However, if you're going to be taking starting up next year, 2022, January, you're going to be having a pass and fail result. So taking that into consideration, as a second year medical student, so we're kind of in a unique position. That is, we can actually choose. We can take it as a pass and fail or as a scored result. And given that we're going to be applying for residencies with a cohort with the applicants with the mixed results, do you think would you still pursue taking a scored result, or would you consider as a pass and fail? And your reasoning actually would be very appreciated.
I think it'll help you stand out if you know you're going to do well. Like if you're hitting like, at least for surgery, like if you're hitting 240s, like I think you should take it. I think it'll help you. Kind of like Cathy was saying, like, you know, it's definitely a filter sometimes, especially for IMG. So that just kind of helps you reaffirm it, and it would kind of give you a leg up, especially if you're like killing it. Definitely take it. But I mean, if you're kind of like struggling to even kind of get average numbers, maybe take it in January.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that as well. If you know if you've been working hard throughout first year and even right now into second year, and definitely take some NBME, take multiple NBME and see how you're doing. Another big thing is step one was so stressful. It really was. That 5 weeks of dedicated time was the worst 5 weeks of my life. I hated every single second of it. I think coming out at the end of it, like, you know, we have this composite photo of all of us right at beginning of third year, and every single person, like the composite photo you guys got of us on match day, it looked different. Everybody looked different. We either gained tons of weight, like me, like I'm a stress weight gainer, or some people are like a stress weight loser. So like you just see all of these people who came back from this 5 awful weeks of studying looking terrible and take the photo that lasts you for the rest of your life, apparently. So take that definitely into consideration when you're picking which way you're gonna go into. And you know, you don't want to make all that sacrifice and then end up with a bad result that can ultimately hurt you either. So know yourself, do some, like, you know, study on yourself, do some NBME practice test, and then decide.
That's a really good question. And Cathy, Caroline says preach on that hell of 5 weeks. Yeah, so it's very unfortunate. Like once I saw that USMLE step one was going pass fail, I was actually very upset about that. I think for certain subspecialties, yeah, like it's not super important, but for others, it's super, super important. So I think it's going to be more difficult for IMGs to separate themselves from US applicants. Also, US schools are going pass fail for grades as well. So now you're like, oh, well, I can't do grades. I can't do USMLE. Obviously, step 2 CK is super important. It's going to become more important. And I think that's actually a better exam of like what kind of doctor you will be. It's more clinically driven than step 1, like what chromosome is this on? But I think, yeah, it's going to be really hard. It's a totally different territory. I think is a really good question. I would say take it early if you can, if you feel prepared, especially if you're trying to do something like orthopedics or vascular surgery, something that's more competitive, plastics, derm. I would take step 1. Are they going to have cutoffs? I'm not sure, because most of the people when you apply would have taken step later than you. So you're like a semester ahead of those that you're applying with. So I'd say a majority of them, or if not all, will have pass fail. So yeah, it's kind of strange. It kind of happened with CS this year. Like I took CS before CS closed, and people were like freaking out, like, oh, is this going to be a problem for like IMGs? They found other avenues, but yeah, if you're doing something difficult and you're prepared, I would take it. But yeah, in regards to the future, it's hard to say what's going to happen. I think it's very unfortunate, but I think you can, you know, separate yourselves with letters of rec, with CK, and your clinical grades and where you fall in your class.
And actually, sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you're also like moving continents and trying to find somewhere to live in that 5 weeks. So it's like literally the worst dedicated ever. And like, I didn't really mean, my number was just an arbitrary number, but like, please do your own research. But I would agree with Colin. Like if you're killing it, you know, and you feel prepared, take it, it'll help you.
And I guess before we move on, I just had a follow-up question to that. Do you foresee the CS module being replaced with something else, or is it just going to be CK from now on?
I don't think so. I don't think they'll bring CS back. I think people celebrated CS being gone so hard that nobody want to bring that back. But for us, we will have OET. We'll have to go through the pathway. Like I took CS. I don't know about Jen, but so Colin and I guess both took CS, so we didn't have to worry about OET. But OET comes with its own challenges as well. Jen, did you take C?
It was
You
not
did
fun.
it? Okay, so you can talk about it.
I mean, like my exam like shut off in the middle because I like did it remotely, and it's like, I mean, it's fine, it's not a big deal, but there was definitely people in our class I think who failed it. But I think everyone, like even American students, are gonna have to do some sort of like global kind of OSCE from their med school. So actually, UQ does a really good job of preparing you clinically. I know like the exam seems so silly, like you're just like memorizing a script sometimes, but like it's actually been pretty helpful sometimes, like having that, you know, just like being able to like spit out a neuro exam, whatever.
Quick question. So during the orientation, usually Ochsner admin team, they usually give us the average score for the step 1. However, I've never heard any average scores for the step 2 and step 3. Do you guys have any data on that, or like maybe anecdotal, I guess, averages?
I think during orientation they'll show you step 2 CK scores from like the previous class, from what I recall. And I think we usually do better on step 2 CK than we do on step 1. I mean, Cathy, Jen, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we do better on CK. Again, back to what Jen was saying about like Australia and being very clinically driven. I talked about that in probably every single interview. I think that's super important, and you need to talk about that, because I don't know any US medical school where you're like doing exams on patients, taking histories on patients in first year. And I think it's a great prep for the hospital. Obviously, it's not a real patient, but I think it's a great prep. And that's something you should for sure talk up in your interview, in every single interview. And that's like, talk about why that's a reason you wanted to go there. The early clinical experience is very important and separates you from others.
Yeah, and going back to your question about CK, I don't think honestly CK is, for us, at least for us who took the scored step 1, CK hasn't traditionally been that big of a deal, as long as you don't get a lower CK score than step 1. I mean, even within a couple points, if you get a really high step 1 score within a couple points is fine. But as long as you don't go lower, and typically people do better in CK because it's clinical knowledge, and it's like it's half clinical knowledge that you're doing every day in your 3rd year, and half of it is a refresher of some of the more basic concept of C1, not the really nitty gritty biochem concept. So people tend to do better.
I would say average for step 2 is usually like 10 points higher than the average for step 1. Step 3, no one, I mean, so for like surgery, I don't know about ortho, but like gen surgeon and vascular, you do like in-service exams every single year. And so no one really cares about your step 3 exam. Like you just literally pass it. I actually know a surgeon at Ochsner who failed their exam. So you can still successfully make it to fellowship having failed your step 3 exam. But like, yeah, as long as you do well on your AB site or your V site, IM is different. I think they actually like care for fellowship what your step 3 was. So
Yeah, it's super important for IM, especially if you're doing like GI or something like that. But no, ortho doesn't care about step 3 either. Just pass it.
Good to know. We have a question from the audience from Roxy, and she asks, what advice do you have for students with no previous research experience? I guess, Cathy, if you could take us away on that.
I just actually, seek out, if you want to do research, seek out help, and seek out any opportunity. I subscribe to a bunch of research-driven like newsletters. So whenever there is like a first like alert of a research popping up, I get that alert and I apply to it. And I try to apply to it with other people, because I know I don't have like at the beginning I didn't have a lot of experience, so it's good to have other people that can go along and help you and going through the process. I found that extremely helpful. I also did look up on a lot of websites, not like our website, like the UQ, like PAH, Ochsner Hospital, and I just looked at their doctor, and in the field that I'm interested in for research, I just reached out to some of those doctors who are doing research that I like. However, nobody wrote me back, but that could potentially be an avenue if they end up writing you back.
All right, thanks. How about you, Colin, Jennifer? Did you have any advice for aspiring researchers?
So yeah, I would say, I mean, like case reports and case here, like, you know, chart reviews are super easy to get on. Most people are like begging for med students to like comb through data, but really try to be like, you know, especially if it's your first paper, maybe you're not going to be first author, but definitely try to be first author on something. And then what's like being on a significant paper, like I just was on a big one, which really helped me a lot in interviews. Like almost all of my interviews talked about it. And it was like a very hot topic right now. So that I would say, like, more than any kind of case report or like data or like anything like that, try to get on some substantial, you know, and it was just because I was like curious. I was like asking like, oh, why do we do this? And they're like, actually, we don't know. Like we're trying to look into it. And so it's like, I don't know, try to get on something kind of significant and it will kind of pave the way for a lot of things.
Yeah, so I did zero research undergrad, zero research first 2 years. So third year was pretty brutal, learning the process of research. I'm not a research person. I don't really enjoy research that much, but it's important for orthopedics. I think, yeah, like Jen said, I think early on, try to do case reports, just get like the feel of what a case report should look like in a case series. Then you can start doing retrospective chart reviews and then prospective studies. But I feel like I've learned a ton, especially in phase 2, about research. It's interesting, Jen brought up her study. So I had a case report. It was about a catfish sting. It led to compartment syndrome and wrist disarticulation. And so that came up in almost every single interview, and it was a case report. So I think anything you can get your hands on. And I mean, you can learn a lot from case reports. You can learn a lot from chart reviews, doing your lit reviews. So I think jump on whatever you can. And it kind of is a numbers game. For ortho, it's a numbers game. So getting as many presentations as possible. So I think if I could have done more research early on, I would have tried to, but I mean, it didn't seem to affect me a ton. I mean, I didn't get interviews at huge academic programs, but that's not my cup of tea. So it worked out fine.
Yeah, so now that you mentioned, I was looking through the applicant data, and I think the mean number of publications for ortho applicants was like 60, and you know, vascular wasn't far behind with I think 58. So, you know, I could hardly wrap my head around how someone can come out of usually at most 2 years with 60 publications, but hey.
Yeah, so for ERAS, it's a little tricky because it's publications, presentations, abstracts. So say I do 15 presentations or 20 presentations, and I actually didn't present them. Say I presented only 4 or 5 of them, but a resident presented 10 others. So that's like 15, 20 on the publications aspect of it. So it's kind of misleading when they say publications. And you also, if you have people like Donald who've been doing research for like years and years and years, or Jen before in undergrad who has tons of research projects. So yeah, the number is big, but I think it's not as big as you think it is, and it's doable. And STEP obviously might be different for you guys, but you can make up for it with higher STEP scores and less research and go to more of a community driven hospital than an academic residency.
All right.
And it also kind of depends on how much of a purist you are with publications. Like, it doesn't always have to be peer reviewed. There is a column for you to submit peer reviewed publications in journals. Like, there's like editorials and stuff. I wrote a piece on COVID and the match at the very beginning of COVID, like maybe like March or April, something like that. And that was published in the New Physician AMSA journal. So I included that as part of my as part of my ERAS. So if you're really interested in writing for columns and for some journals that's not necessarily peer review, you can get your number up too.
All right, thank you for that, Cathy. And we have a question from Anya. Does it matter if your research topic is in the subspecialty of your matching? And as we briefly touched on that, it doesn't really, because you're usually coming into it with several research projects under your belt, and they don't all have to be strictly ortho.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, I don't know. Vascular, I would definitely say try to get some vascular research going. But yeah, as long as you're kind of getting projects and like you can like the Ochsner journal, like Cathy was saying, like a lot of like things you don't think matter, like keep up with like update your CV, like even now, like even things you don't think are like mattering, you can add to your ERAS. You can even add things that you're like submitting and then they can get rejected later. So like if you just submit it at the time of application, you can add it in press. So there you go, keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's huge. For sure what Jen said. So if you submit to like an abstract to like a, now I'm blanking. You submit an abstract to like a research convention, conference or whatever, you can put it as like as submitted. And so that also adds into your total of abstracts. So that blows up your abstract number or publication number as well.
Good to know. All right, don't think we have any more questions from the audience. So once again, I just wanted to say thank you to all three of you for taking the time to talk to us. Hopefully the audience goes away having a little more knowledge of the process and they don't feel as overwhelmed moving forward. So once again, thank you three for coming.
Thanks for having us. Feel free to reach out. I'm sure you guys have our emails, but you know, feel free to, don't be strangers. Like I know I was like definitely scared to reach out to people. So like blow us up. We're not going to annoy you. I'm sure the doctors will, but.
Yeah, feel free to reach out on Facebook and add Facebook, email, whatever you guys want.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.